Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Diane Feinstein. I'm Transportation Manager for Fairfield and Sassoon Transit, which you guys who are riders is better known as FAST. And this whole process is here to do an in-depth study of FAST and identify its strengths and weaknesses. Now, I need to let some of you know who have Solano Express questions that this focus is on local routes. We can take down your information regarding Solano Express, but that's actually done separately in coordination with other cities and Solano Transportation Authority. But we can take down that feedback and pass it on to Solano Transportation Authority. And we are looking at Solano Express's impacts on the local routes and how that works. So we're looking at the impacts from COVID-19, and we're trying to find recommendations that will help us sustain our service post-pandemic. And that's, you guys being here tonight is a big part of that. We have initial recommendations that we want to get as much public feedback as possible on. And so we're trying to emerge post-pandemic in the strongest position possible and actually provide a service that is utilized even more than it is now. We know the local service is important, and our ridership is actually 2/3 uses our local system and 1/3 uses our commuter system. So you might say, why are we undertaking this project? Like I mentioned about the pandemic, we've seen growth in jobs and population, 9% population growth since 2010 and 5% more jobs. But there really has been a big shift from farm sector to private sector jobs. Like I said, your participation is crucial in all this, and we really want to take these meetings and future meetings to have us get the most feedback possible. And I'm going to put you now in the capable hands of Raul Kumar, who is from Innovate Mobility and is helping us with this study.
Thanks, Diane. And I want to echo Diane's comments, thanking all of you taking some time out of your day and out of your schedules, which I'm sure are busy, to give us some feedback. I know that many of you are riders and you ride currently and you ride Solano Express, or you ride fast local routes. Your feedback is welcome here. We are here to take your comments, apply them to what are some very draft recommendations, refine them, and come back to you with a network that is more accessible, provides a better rider experience, and really addresses all the things that Diane just mentioned in terms of growth in Fairfield and Sassoon City. One of the things I think for the last year and a half we haven't heard just a little bit about, but we've heard a lot, is COVID-19. And we know that COVID-19 has had a dramatic impact on everyone in one way, shape, or form. From a mobility standpoint, that's what we're here to talk about today. We've seen some very, very interesting shifts. So, at its worst, public transit usage in Solano County was down about 85%. That was around April of 2020. As we've creeped back up, transit is still down about 16%. But one of the things, and I'm sure you see this on your day-to-day commutes now, is driving is actually higher now than it was pre-pandemic. So we have to do something about it, whether it's environmental sustainability, whether it's accessibility, whether it's equity. We have to do something about making sure that transit is the most viable option to get large groups of people from here to there. And those are some of the suggestions we want to talk about today. Speaking of driving, Another thing that we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic is that driving patterns have simply changed. We still have rush hours. Everyone lives in rush hour, especially those of you who commute from Sassoon city or Fairfield to Sacramento or down into the city. You know that rush hour is bad, but what we're seeing more and more of is a higher number of cars on the road in off-peak periods. These are those periods where rush hours ended, usually congestion goes down and you can actually get to where you're going faster. Not so much, and that has a lot to do with changing work patterns and changing travel patterns. And one of in two of the days that we've seen the most drastic impacts are Saturdays and Sundays, and we've seen that in fast transit system itself. In fact, ridership, while it's down still on weekdays, transit ridership is back up to pre-pandemic levels, and if not a little bit higher on Saturdays and Sundays. We have put forth a set of draft recommendations that were grounded in some very key guiding principles. One of those is to collaboratively work on what is that system of tomorrow. This is not something where we sit off in a corner, we discuss what's the best, and we put it out to the public. We want to iterate and continually upgrade and update our assumptions. And that's also grounded in getting as much information as possible. We started the study back in December, and as you can imagine, transit ridership down. Just counting riders on the bus wasn't enough. So we've actually purchased data on travel patterns throughout the county and most of the state as well that shows how people move pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and now we've updated post-pandemic. I've said the term experience quite a bit. A lot of what you're going to see today is focused on reducing wait time, reducing travel time, improving the access to the system. These are all what we call the experiential indicators. We're not just talking about improving things like on-time performance or vehicle safety. Those are still very critical to a transit system and to a city like Fairfield. However, we also want to focus on you, the rider. And as we do that, we want to develop new service standards for modern times. Where we think about how people travel and how people move and having the service be more responsive. This is our system today. These are the local routes, as Diane mentioned. We are focused mostly on local and feeding Solano Express. So there were a couple of questions about being a Sassoon City resident, traveling onto the GX. We want to talk about how you can actually do that. Our recommendation would be how you can do that better and in a more convenient fashion. But we are focused mostly on the local routes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and the accessibility of those routes throughout the cities of Fairfield and Sassoon City. As I mentioned, population has been growing 8 to 9% since the last census, and it's spreading now. We're seeing more and more population in the Cordelia region, in going up towards Vacaville, and there's large pockets of the service area that we've seen population grow in the last 10 years that don't have access to fast, convenient public transportation. So we're trying to address that. The other thing we want to look at is access to jobs. Access to jobs isn't just a nice thing to have. It's critical for the economy. It's critical for public transportation to lead the economic comeback by providing better access to jobs. How do we do that? First thing we look at is if you had a car, you lived in Fairfield, Sassoon City, and we said, you have 45 minutes to drive, how many jobs can you access? The darker the color, those are the jobs that you can access within 45 minutes. Now, if you're on public transit, these are the number of jobs you can access. It's about 80% less within the same amount of time. So we want to change that. We want to make the system much, much, much better for access to jobs, healthcare, school, etc. And probably the most important thing we want to look at, and I think some of you are transit aficionados. I know, Chandra, you've been on some of our calls, and Mike, you're well renowned in the transportation sectors in the Sacramento and Fairfield regions. We hear about this term transit dependency, this idea that there's a certain population based on socioeconomic indicators that have to use transit. I'm not a big believer in that, and we've tried to structure the study to not say that people will be transit dependent and so they will ride. What we want to instead look at is something called mobility vulnerability. This idea that we want to understand where the vulnerable populations are in these two cities and make sure whatever we do provides them equitable access, but also enhances the services that they have. But we don't just look at transportation and transit. We look at congestion. We look at sidewalks. We look at all the things that go into a full journey. And this mobility vulnerability index shows that the routes that FAST operates do cover most of the vulnerable regions. However, we now want to look at also the amount of time it takes for people to get from one point of the city to the other. Based upon those, we've come up with what we call the 5 big moves. These 5 moves, if we do it properly, will create a more accessible, equitable, sustainable, and resilient system for years to come. Something that allows people to get in and around Solano County better and faster and more cost effectively than driving, hopefully. A system that the cities of Sassoon City and Fairfield can actually develop around and build around. These are the 5 big moves, as we like to call them, and I'll talk about each one of them in a little bit of detail, and then we'll go right into the recommendations. So let's start by connecting local communities. We can't look at Fairfield and Sassoon City on an island. Obviously, we've got people here from Sacramento. It's a region and not just 2 cities independently. And when we look at how people travel, about 23% of the trips to Vacaville originate from Fairfield or Sassoon City, 21% to Vallejo or Benicia, and then 77% of Fairfield residents travel outside of Fairfield at least once a month. So we can't just look at the confines of these 2 cities, draw a wall around them and say, never shall you reach the rest of the region. I talked a little bit about how travel patterns have changed. We've seen this. You see between the hours of 11 to 5, 11 a.m. to 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Those are generally what we call midday hours. Those are generally where we see fewer riders on public transit. Not anymore. We're seeing a lot more people traveling during those days. So we understand this is something we call latent demand, that there's a population that wants to travel during this time that needs access to better transportation services. And when we provide that better access, when we did surveys of riders on the bus, hopefully you all filled out a survey form and submitted either electronically or through fax or email, or you were contacted by one of our surveyors. We found out that almost 2/3 of folks will use FAST in a post-pandemic world. And of those folks, they want better connections and faster service. So if we enhance access, we know that people will ride the service. We also want to connect better regionally. Now, again, a lot of Solano Express riders here. This is probably coming as no surprise to you, but these are some big numbers. If you look at San Francisco, which has a million commutes a day going into it, almost 1.3% of those commutes are coming from Fairfield or Sassoon City. Sacramento, almost 4% of all commutes into Sacramento come from Fairfield or Sassoon City. That's a lot of people that are traveling out. So connecting to the Blue Line or the GX is critical for the local lines to do. And then the last thing I want to introduce is this concept of microtransit. So when we look at a city that's growing and we look at Fairfield and having good big portions of the city where we've seen development, it is extremely expensive for a system like FAST to expand to those. So you get this dilemma of what we call coverage versus frequency. So what does that mean? It means that a transit system can only cover so much before it has to reduce the number of buses that come every hour. And when we do that reduction, it reduces the experience. It makes people not want to ride. And so now a system has expanded its service and you don't exactly have a lot of people riding. We want to introduce a new type of mode called microtransit. Some of you may have taken it. I know there's a couple Sacramento RT customers here who may have taken it in the past. We want to bring microtransit to Fairfield and Sassoon City. And before we go into the route recommendations, I want to talk a little bit about what microtransit is. So what is microtransit? You can travel to a bus stop and take a fixed route service to a drop-off point as you do today. But with microtransit, you do it in a little bit of a different fashion. You could have what we call a virtual stop, meaning it's at your doorstep or at a central meeting point very close to you. You can use your smartphone, and even if you are a person with reduced mobility, in a wheelchair, or in need of special assistance, if you have a smartphone, you can push a button, a vehicle will be alerted that you need a ride, it'll come get you. Now, if you don't have a smartphone and you're with a group of people, you can use the web, request a vehicle, and say you're going to that same drop-off point, that vehicle will come get you. Now, all of a sudden, it's grouped trips like a traditional fixed route public transit system is done, but it has done it in a way where these riders don't have to wait as long and their travel times are less. Now, if you don't have access to the internet, if you don't have access to a smartphone, say you're an unbanked customer, you can call into dispatch, say, I'm here, I need to go to the drop-off point, and the vehicle will come get you. As the vehicle has grouped all these folks together who are going to a central drop-off point, it can do it quickly through technology. So we don't leave anybody out. And that's the kind of service we want to bring to Fairfield and Sassoon City in concert with higher frequency, much more rapid routes that are running through the area. Let's talk a little bit about Sassoon City. I think we had a school principal who's here in Sassoon City, couldn't agree with you more about providing better school access. Here's what we are recommending for Sassoon City. The blue triangle, or hopefully you can see it, the blue area on the bottom right-hand corner is the coverage for our proposed Sassoon City microtransit service. So as I showed you in the past previous slides, if you're a Sassoon City resident, you can, through a smartphone, through a regular phone, or through the internet, request a vehicle, and it'll come get you at either a predetermined stop or a stop nearby where you are, what we call a virtual stop, and you can travel within Sassoon City on demand. If you want to travel outside of Sassoon City, say you want to go to Solana Transit Center because you work at the mall, or say you want to travel to Travis Air Force Base because you need to go see the doctor at the medical center, it'll take you there. You need to connect to the Green Line, or the GX, it'll take you there. You want to connect to the Route 6, that'll connect you to the rest of the service area, it'll take you there. You want to go to Fairfield Transportation Center, it'll take you there, all at the push of a button, at the dial of a phone call, or at the click of a mouse on the internet. And we think this is going to be a really exciting way that Sassoon City residents can actually interact with public transportation in a faster and more experiential way than ever before. And we propose that's going to be coming in January of 2022. Cordelia. That's another region that to take public transit out there would be extremely expensive. The 8 goes out there, it serves the library. It's a fast growing region. It's pretty well contained. You have the Red Top Park and Ride. You've got a lot of great trips that would happen right in that region. We're proposing a similar zone to what we talked about in Sassoon City with microtransit there in Cordelia. So this red area and a little bit more would also be an on-demand zone. So you could travel within this region, again, click of a mouse, dialing of a phone, or on a smartphone app. And finally, when we're all said and done, that Cordelia microtransit would be proposed to launch in June of 2022. Also in June, we propose to launch a Fairfield-wide microtransit service that would feed the existing or the new fixed route service that we're proposing here. And you could travel within Fairfield, again, using an app, a telephone, or the internet in a similar fashion, and connect all throughout the city very, very quickly and easily. Now, for all of that to occur, we also have to restructure some of the routes. And to talk about the restructuring, I want to introduce CJ Bright, my colleague, who's going to talk about some of the changes we're proposing. CJ, let me know when you want to flip slides.
Well, overall, thank you, and good evening, everybody. Hope you're all having a great day and enjoying the presentation so far. Want to talk about the current state of Route 1. Route 1 is essentially the busiest local route in the network. As you all know, it starts from the FTC, operates through the Civic Center and up Texas Street to about Dixon Hill Road. We believe that Route 1 has the opportunity to carry a lot more people by enhancing the connectivity throughout the city of Fairfield. Today, we see that the average wait time is about every 17 minutes. On Route 1, we're looking at it across the day on weekdays as well as on Saturdays. We don't foresee that to change immediately in January 2022, but effective in June of 2022, we do believe in expanding the service for Route 1. Now, I want to talk about Route 1 specifically, but keep in mind that this is actually a much more holistic change that also incorporates Route 3 as well. So right now, we're going to focus on the Route 1 portion of the change. Starting in June of 2022, we do propose extending Route 1 from the FTC further west to service the Solano Community College, to service Cordelia, the library, as well as the Red Top Park and Ride. We will be proposing to operate service later to 10 p.m. on both weekdays and Saturday. One of the biggest changes in this corridor is that Route 1 will also have additional service with the new changes to Route 3, so that if you are on Texas, particularly around the Smart and Final, as well as if you're along the Solano Community College corridor, around the Cordelia Library and the Red Top Park and Ride, there will be a combined service. So there are buses every 15 minutes during the day on weekdays and every half hour on Saturdays. Route 1 will continue to service the Civic Center specifically. And instead of operating via Dover on the north end of the route, it will continue to operate both directions on North Texas Street. We propose having an extension from Dixon Hill Road to Manuel Campos Parkway to further improve connectivities on the north end of the route. Next slide, Raul. So for Route 2, we do propose to keep it the same in January, but effective June 2022, with the introduction of the Fairfield citywide microtransit, that the Route 2 would go away, but there will be a portion of Route 2 that will still be maintained by Route 6, which will operate east-west along Travis Boulevard. Next slide, Raul. Route 3 is the second half of the Texas corridor that I mentioned earlier with Route 1. Currently, Route 3 operates via Atlantic Avenue through the Smart and Final and the Fairfield Walmart, through the Solano Town Center to the FTC. We see that Route 3 has an average wait time roughly of every 17 minutes, and that will also stay the same in January 2022, excuse me. But similar to Route 1, we do see a major change effective June of 2022. Next slide, Rob. Thank you. Similar to Route 1, Route 3 will operate via Texas from Manuel Campus Parkway in the north to the Red Top Park and Ride in the southwest part of the city in Cordelia. Route 3 would operate via Texas, similar to Route 1, but the key difference is that instead of operating through the Civic Center, Route 3 would continue to service the Solano Town Center. And so the key point to remember between Routes 1 and 3 is that Route 1 will operate via the Civic Center and Route 3 will operate via the Solano Town Center. So if you're going to those destinations, you would need to know which bus you are on. But for the rest of the route, you can board any bus and there'll be a bus combined every 15 minutes during weekdays and every 30 minutes on Saturdays. There are corridors along Route 3 that will be replaced with microtransit, particularly around Dover Avenue and in the neighborhood between Solano Town Center and the Smart and Final. Similar to Route 1, we propose extending service at 10 p.m. on both weekdays and Saturday. Next slide, Rob. Route 4, similar to Route 2, we do forecast that the service will be folded into the new microtransit service that will transport you anywhere within the city of Fairfield. And then for additional connectivity, you can transfer to routes 1 and 3 to get to your destination. As Rob mentioned earlier, Route 5 is a part of the Sassoon City microtransit deployment. So Route 5 will be replaced by the microtransit operation effective January of 2022. Route 6 has a two-step change, which is a little bit different than what we've seen for routes 1 and 3. With Route 6, today, the average wait time is about 22.5 minutes. and this route connects Fairfield with Sassoon City. Starting in January, in conjunction with the deployment of the Sassoon City Microtransit, Route 6 will only operate between the Solano Town Center and the Sassoon City Senior Center. The new route would have an average wait time of every 15 minutes. For those who want to travel further into Sassoon City, there will be a connection to the microtransit that will take you to your ultimate destination. We do propose extending service later in January to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 5 p.m. on Saturdays. For June, there will be a second shift with Route 6. We're going to extend it from the Solano Town Center down Travis to service the FTC for the first time, and then as well as going into the industrial corridor near the Solano County Health and Human Services around the Jelly Belly factory. We do propose extending the service to every 30 minutes all day long and operate the service until 10 p.m. on weekdays and on Saturdays as well. Next slide, Rob. I was going to talk about Route 7 and 8 real quick. Route 7 is similar to Routes 2 and 4. It will operate until June of 2022, where it will then be replaced with Routes 1 and 3 that will operate from the Cordelia Library and the Solano Community College to the FTC. And then with Route 8, it will operate until January 2022, and then effective January 2022, the Cordelia Zone Microtransit would take over the operation for delivering service in the community of Cordelia.
Thanks, CJ. So as you can see, our goal is really to simplify from 8 current routes that operate on different frequencies to 3 high frequency routes supported by on-demand microtransit. The on-demand microtransit will have an average wait time of between 12 and 24 minutes. So that is better than the current wait time on almost every route that operates in these regions. In most cases, you're going to see 15-minute wait times or less in regions that currently have 45-minute routes or 60-minute routes. You're going to see travel times that are halved, if not more, because of the microtransit. And so in June, again, you're going to see a simpler system with on-demand service that bolsters existing fixed routes that have been enhanced to provide greater frequency, greater access, and greater experience. The proof is in how the riders are going to travel. Looking at all the data, we looked at the top origins and top destinations for all the system today. And with the combination of the changes in the fixed route network and the new microtransit service, the average rider who travels between some of these key destinations is going to save about 30 minutes per day in their total commute. So that's 30 minutes back per day. That's if you ride 3 times a week, you're talking about, or 3 days a week, you're talking an hour and a half per week, and so on and so forth. We're going to give you back 2 weeks a year of travel time if you ride between these major destinations. Where are we in the process? So again, we've been at this since December, collecting data, speaking to riders, speaking to the community, listening. We're at the point now where we have put our draft recommendations here in front of you. We're going to actually have 2 more phases of public input. The next will be public displays that will be put throughout the area, and Nicole will talk about those in a second. And then another round of public meetings once we've received all the feedback from today, those public displays, and then we're going to have another set of what we call pop-up workshops. So in key areas, 3 areas throughout the system, we're going to actually sit down and listen to you. We want to talk to folks that are traveling within that area, how they're going to be affected directly. And the goal is by the middle of September, have a complete report approved by the City of Fairfield City Council. With that, I want to turn it back over to Diane to close out the meeting. And Nicole, I know, has got a couple of things to add.
So people have additional comments. Who do you suggest that those comments go to?
Yeah, great question, Diane. So we do have a project website that we update regularly. It's fastforward2021.com. And in there, on the website, you can sign up for email updates, and you can also submit any of your comments or questions through that comment box. Towards the end of this month, from July 26th to August 27th, we will be placing public displays with information about the updated proposed changes to the Fast Bus system. We'll be placing those at 8 key destinations throughout Fairfield, Sassoon, and Cordelia. And during the weeks of August 9th and August 16th, we're still finalizing the dates and locations, but our team will be holding 3 pop-up workshops, one in Fairfield, one in Sassoon, and one in Cordelia. So we are identifying either a local community event, such as a farmer's market, or we'll be going to a key activity center, such as a heavily trafficked grocery store or the BART station, and we'll be there for a set of time during a day with maps and interactive activities to share information about these updated proposed changes and collect comments from all of you. And we'll also have an online comment form for you to review the maps and the changes and submit your comments that way as well. So that will be happening from late July through late August.
So as I mentioned, we are in the process of taking the public comment, and that is right now. So we've been out with the riding public as well as non-riding public in the broader community. We've been taking comments for the last couple of months. This is really our first foray introducing our draft recommendations. We'll be taking those in through the next couple of months and then coming back in the very early fall with a refined set of recommendations. The hope is that we've proposed to the city a plan that can be put into effect in January and June of 2022. Obviously, leading up to those changes, there will be a smaller set of meetings and things like that to help inform the public and broader marketing campaigns on how microtransit works and where it's going and how you use it and how you download the apps, etc.
And again, as a quick reminder, towards the end of this month, around July 26th, that week, we'll be putting up 8 different public displays throughout Fairfield, Cordelia, and Sassoon with maps of these proposed changes, as well as a QR code that folks can scan to give their input online. And then we'll also be holding a set of 3 in-person pop-up workshops where we'll essentially either table at a community event with the different proposed service changes maps and talk to people about these changes and ask for their comments. Again, we'll be having 3 of those, one in Fairfield, one in Sassoon, one in Cordelia, and that will be between the weeks of August 9th through the week of August 16th. I do encourage you, if you have any specific other comments that come to mind, either later tonight or this week or next week, you can always submit them through the project website, fastforward2021.com. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. With that, I don't know if Diane, if you have any final remarks that you want to share before we adjourn.
Other than just saying thank you for, this initial feedback. Really appreciate it. We're really excited at what these recommendations could turn out to be for Fairfield. And we're looking at things that most Bay Area agencies are just beginning to look at. So we're going to definitely be a guinea pig in the Bay Area for initiating some of these things. So, we really want to be thorough and do a really good public outreach to get the best input that we can.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks.